Good afternoon, welcome. This is the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, July 18th. Those of you who are joining us, thank you for being here. Our first item for discussion this evening is a discussion regarding financial policy. We have our
Good afternoon. This is the first in a series of budget conversations. The financial policies create the rules within which we operate. And on the screen there, you can see a list of our existing policies and the year they were last updated. I highlighted the three I plan to do a deeper dive in, but just before we move on to those, I wanted to make a few comments. The revenue policy used to include the tax increment finance or economic development policy within it. A change that's being made is that's being replaced in reference to the new economic development policy. And when I say new as of 2018, I believe. The investment policy from 2021 simply replaces the 1995 policy with no changes being suggested at this time. Are there any questions on any other policy aside from the three that I have highlighted that council would like to?
questions.
Okay. So on the reserve policy suggested changes, general fund, we actually have remaining at what is already existing, and that's 25% of general fund expenditures. You may recall from prior years in budget time, in practice, we have traditionally used 35% in past practice. So 25% just remaining the same. The other operating funds in the 95 policy are silent. We are recommending a 25% similar to general fund as an addition to the financial policies. We're also recommending that we add a reserve policy for the health insurance fund, being a self-funded insurance plan with the minimum to cover the OPEB liability, which is approximately 2.2 million as of our last audit. The reason why we chose this one over other alternatives, for instance, we talked about 25% is with the new plan change that we're contemplating. It provides us more flexibility and a stronger reserve that we are planning to review every year, as we will all financial policies. We are recommending that we remove the employee benefits reserve at this time as we continue to review how the funds are utilized and looking to make changes. You'll see in my next presentation a little bit on what we're proposing with the employee benefits. Use of that fund. You will recall we had a conversation about the employee benefits levy last year and how that is utilized. So this is one of those that we kind of need to take a breather year, contemplate how we're going to use it going forward, and then maybe we'll need to bring it back. And then changing the equipment reserve. This is expanded to include not just the general fund equipment reserve, but the other utility and road use replacement funds. And it does also remove procedural items. For instance, it did require that schedules of equipment $500 plus be included. Something we're going to be doing on our end anyway, but 500 is a little low. So we're leaving that up to our. Any questions on the reserve policy?
None.
Debt management side. Right now, our policy is 50% of our statutory limit of 5% of the overall gross valuation. For fiscal year 23, that was approximately 174 million. That's the statutory 5. So 50% of that is what our limit is. For fiscal year 24, it increases to 179 million. At this time, we are actually recommending, or I would recommend, that City Council consider increasing it to 70%. The reason being, as we were building out the models and looking at the capital improvement program, we felt like this is something council should consider as we are looking towards projects such as the aquatic center feasibility, or the aquatic center, which is a 20 million plus dollar project. It allows greater flexibility and the ability to borrow at a lower rate versus using annual appropriation debt. So we often use annual, or have been using annual appropriation debt when we are looking at tax increment finance related projects. It does make it a little bit more complicated in trying to track where we're at against our statutory limit. And we have to rerun that number at least twice per year as we're doing borrowing. The other one that we did contemplate looking at or putting in front of city council is considering that you exclude any voter approved. So like if we were to put it out to, if we kept it at 50%, but then said that doesn't include any voter approved bond issuances, in practice, you would think, okay, then, I would just not include that one issuance that we did a voter approved. But how it actually works in practice is we tend to combine the voter approved bond with our regular annual bond. And then you run into the issue of how do you then percentage allocate out to figure out where we're at. So those were two alternatives we kind of talked about, but ultimately thought the 70% made more sense, again, for council to consider. I will kind of kick it back to you guys to comment on that.
What's the downside of increasing that?
The downside of increasing it, there's no downside that I'm aware of increasing it. I've been told that a lot of cities actually have 70 or 80%. I heard that from Tiana Pooler, our previous municipal financial advisor. I've also heard it from Michael Maloney, our current underwriter. I would say the downside would be on the utilization side. Like we will want to keep track of how much we utilize. Meaning we don't want to go ultimately all the way up to the 70% on the utilization. Unless for emergency.
Other than the capacity of being at our percentage within that, does that fluctuate any on the overall bond rating portfolio that the city's looked at in changing our category by increasing that to 70%?
But does it change our rate? Is that what
Is
you're
it
asking?
are we looked at favorably by raising our capacity internally? I mean, I understand how we're ranked within it as long as we're within the boundary lines or, the margin, so to speak. But when a city or a municipality starts to raise their own internal limits, I think it's looked at a little bit, but I don't know if it's rated or ranked by that.
I don't know the detail of the balance scorecard, but I mean, obviously, anytime you're increasing something, the more conservative you are, the better or more favorable it looks.
That would be that's the one thing I have reservation about going from 50 to 70. And that might be for just some sideline conversation with me later, but that's the one thing I have a concern about.
And one thing that because at this time, I'm asking you to consider it. We've got a few years out when it comes to the aquatic center and some of those projects that are heavier. This is something we could bring back in more detail with where we're at with debt and what that looks like with the CIP and leave it at the 50% at this time, if that's what you would prefer.
Steve?
Yeah. The city has completed a lot of large projects in the last few years. Obviously, that has increased our debt limit. We do have the debt limit availability going up each year, which even at 50% allows additional capacity. And yes, the aquatic center is still down the road, but I feel that there needs to be, I'd like to see more in-depth analysis. I know we've touched upon this a few times here or there, maybe in our strategic planning meeting or budget meeting, but I think it's going to take a lot more discussion and detail for me to want to increase it beyond the 50%. I'm a huge proponent of debt management and being debt averse. So I think we need to look at how to manage this better, maybe look at some better analysis on when to increase it, why we need to increase it, because that debt's going to be there for a long time and we're making decisions that's going to affect our citizens for many, many years. So as that number goes up, that 70%, if we ever get near that number, that's going to be a very, very large number. And that's going to take a long time to pay that down. So I'd like to see some better long-term analysis on that before I would consider increasing that beyond the 50.
Go ahead, Paul.
I agree with what both of them just said, and my concern with what Randy brought up too was if that would hurt our rating. And then out of curiosity, if it's looked into more. This chart that you supplied with our sister cities, or not sister cities, our comparable cities. You had, like Cedar Falls, it says 100%. Urbandale's at 70, 75, we've got 100, 80, 100, another 50. I'd be curious to know, so if they've got 70%, how close they are to that. So where those cities actually are, when the time comes for us to discuss this more. 'Cause I would think, I totally agree with what Steve said, so. Thanks.
Anyone else?
We will plan to change that one to 50% as we get to August for approval. And we'll do more analysis and bring that back as we come with the CIP.
Is there anyone who objects to that?
Other items on the debt management, we did remove the two that you can see crossed out on the screen. Those weren't benchmarks that we were seeing being used by other organizations. And when you are abating, which we do abate a lot of our payments with tax increment finance or other sources, those just did not seem to make sense for the city to keep in there. And then we did also add a policy on refunding so that we would only entertain doing a refunding if there's a savings benefit minimum of 3%. On the financial reporting and accounting suggested changes, this was actually language that I was seeing consistently in other cities' financial policies. So replacing it, what you see on the screen, I'm not going to read all of it, but monthly and annual reports should present a summary of financial information by major fund and activity type. This is one thing Ryan and I have continued to discuss over and over and coming back to on what should be reported to city council, at what level, what amount of detail. I think it was about a year and a half ago, we changed. I think we're providing the full budget worksheet report to city council at one time, made the packet really lengthy. We removed that, and now city council, and I'm going to show it, is only receiving this high-level report that shows the general fund, each fund balance, receipts and expenses, and then the ending fund balance for each month, as well as this investments, which basically shows where our money is. What I am proposing council would entertain in monthly reports going forward is this expense budget by function report. This would only be for the operating funds, so it would only be about 5 pages long. Inserted into the monthly report, this will show you for each fund and I should say function rather than department, but they align for the most part, where the expenses are to budget on a monthly basis. And then also revenue by account classification. And the reason why we choose account classification on this side, but by function on the other side, is simply because that is how the state budget forms are created, and that is what is required. And that's what you formally adopt when we're looking at the budget. And the revenue report actually is only about a 2-page report. Comments, questions?
No, I would just say I like seeing it. I always like seeing it by the account classification, and where the money's being spent. I mean, I understand doing it by the departments or group, if you want to say that way. Both are kind of reflective. So if one seems to be way over, you're able to look at the other and kind of get an indication of what category of expense that may be triggering some of that. But I mean, I've always liked the account classification details myself.
I anticipated you might ask that or state that. So my thought on that was we would provide it by department, but when we see something trending over or under, we would provide what is
Detail.
underlying that.
That's fine.
And then on a quarterly basis, provide you the detail.
You do, and again, the count just in a summary fashion as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
And for us non-CPAs, if we switch to something new, maybe a 5-minute tutorial on how to read it.
Certainly. Certainly. If there are no other comments on the financial policies as a whole, we would be looking to have council approve the financial policies with the debts limit still at 50% on August 3rd. And then we would start including those additional reports in the monthly report. And then, of course, the financial policies going forward would be reviewed and updated on an annual basis. Any other questions? This next item actually came about as we were looking to what we normally do. The employee benefits levy is supposed to be used for employee benefits. And so at year end, we run a report to determine what amount is remaining or left unspent out of those dollars and where do we transfer them to. Ironically, at the same time, we were having a conversation with PDCM and HR department about our reserve for health insurance and where that should be. So in this conversation, we were having a discussion about what should be flowing through the health insurance fund versus what should not be flowing through the health insurance fund. And as a result of this conversation, the recommendation we're making to city council for that transfer this year is to transfer from the general fund. This is again, the remaining employee benefits levy dollars to a new wellness fund of 100,000 and to the health insurance fund of 156 and change. Here's kind of the background on this. The health insurance fund currently accounts for the following: health insurance plans, dental insurance plans, Chapter 411 disability retirements. So this is when police or fire ends up with some type of injury and they end up retiring on disability. And then they stay on our plan until they hit Medicare age, and then we pay Medicare supplements. And then also the wellness program. In our conversations with PDCM, they've highly recommended both this year and last year that we need to isolate the self-funded health and dental insurance plans so that those are the only activities flowing through the health insurance fund. With that, then we need to move the Chapter 411 disability retirement payments and the wellness program. And so we're proposing that the employee benefits fund be now utilized, which was previously used for employee payouts, retirements specifically, to the Chapter 411 disability retirement payments. And then we have this new wellness fund to account for the wellness program, which overall provides greater transparency to you, to the public, and even to our HR department, who loves to ask me where we're at with the wellness program and what amount of dollars we have to go towards the next year's program. Any questions?
No.
So our next steps then would be to create a new wellness fund, and then you would see on the August 3rd city council agenda to approve this transfer.
Any final questions for Leanne?
Thank you.
Next item is a presentation from Dave on land use development regulations along Tower Terrace Road and Highway 13.
All right, before I begin, you're going to have a few items in front of you. It'll be homework for later. No test at the end, just homework. Okay, so over the last few months, we've really seen some of our commercial corridors come into focus as we've continued to grow north and east in our community. We've had some uses proposed, and it's generated a lot of conversation with staff, the council, the general public at large. So we're going to do a quick little brief overview of the corridors, what they're zoned today, how that reflects in the comprehensive plan, and then talk a little bit more about kind of some of the things we've done over the last year to ensure we're getting high quality projects and uses out in these corridors, and then hit a few items that we need to address moving forward. And then I'll leave you with some homework. You have a couple weeks to work on. So starting off, we're going to start with the Tower Terrace corridor. Tower Terrace Road itself is the dashed purple line through almost the middle of the screen there. Linmar is the big blue property right there in the middle of the map. right there. So Tower Terrace Road, as we all know, goes 380 to 13 ultimately. Over the past, majority of it's been zoned, or I'm sorry, majority of it's been land use designated as commercial property. We've seen a lot of amendments over the last few years to expand some of that commercial activity further down Tower Terrace Road to the Linn-Mar campus, along Winslow Road, and then ultimately to the Indian Creek neighborhood that's yet to develop to the east. Most of this property, that bright red, is our BC, that's our business community district. I'll talk a little bit about that in the next few slides. Our second corridor is the Highway 13 corridor. And this is really, I'm not talking about Highway 100. When I talk Highway 13, land uses are very similar to Highway 100. So we have over 3 miles currently in the city limits. We have over 5 miles between the south limits all the way up to Prospect Meadows, mix of commercial, residential, and manufacturing zoning on these. All the zoning does match the underlying land use designations of the comprehensive plan. The BR district, which is the predominant commercial district, is that fairly dark red on this map, with the purple being the majority of the manufacturing districts. The yellows are residential. We have quite a bit of residential along Highway 13 that's existed really prior to our more current comprehensive plan. And as we begin that next exercise, we're going to address how we're land use designating along our divided highways. So we're going to talk, I'm not going to talk great detail about BC and BR. These are our zoning districts that we're focused on. But with the new code, we went to form-based code, and that's removing ourselves from what traditional zoning was. As you may recall, some of you, when we had the old zoning code, we had our residential here, our commercial here, our industrial here. We really separated these districts out. A form-based code is more focused on bringing these uses together. Upper story living, mixed housing, commercial live workspaces, offices, civic properties as well. So it's really focused on the appearance, the aesthetics of the property, the building, the design of it, and less about what occurs inside that building. It's all about creating high quality projects and getting away from this use has to be specifically here, and you can't have residential anywhere near it. That's the old mindset. Most communities are shifting to this form-based code. So we've done that. So what does that look like? These are just images from around Iowa in our BC district. It's designed, again, designed to accommodate mid-sized retail service development along corridors such as Tower Terrace Road and Marion Boulevard, 7th Avenue. We're seeing a wide range of uses. It could be multi-story with multifamily on top, standalone small buildings like a scooters, and then everything in between, up to around 30,000 square feet more or less. It's a pretty good representation of what we see, I think, in the metro area in Iowa. As we move to the BR then, still a lot of the same uses. It's still retail, still some of the service industries, but the scale gets a lot bigger. As you can see at Costco and Hy-Vee, just 100,000 square foot buildings. You're going to look at projects that are going to be more geared toward 20,000 cars a day as opposed to only 10. Again, just another good sample of what could occur in our BR districts along Highway 13 and Highway 100. So moving on to some of the homework, and this is the same image that we just saw. I gave you guys handed out the master use list. This is not officially part of the zoning code, but it's something we created to make it easy. Across the top, you're going to have all the zoning districts. Down the side, you're going to have all the uses: residential, commercial, multifamily, industrial, civic. It'll lay out what's permitted, what's conditional, and the conditional goes to the zoning board of adjustment for approval, and what's accessory. And then if it doesn't have any of those, it's not permitted in those districts. So if it's blank, if you have a battery manufacturer, it's not going to show up in the residential district, so it'll be blank. So what we're going to be asking council to do over the next couple of weeks is, what do you want to know more about? What specific items do you want to learn about from a use? Is it a record store? Where does that final record store fit in to our code? If you could come with us, let myself, Ryan, or Kim know, hey, I want to learn more about gas stations. Where are they allowed? What are the standards? And then we can start identifying gaps in our code to help us either draft new code regulations, move the use out of the district, or maybe move it from something that's permitted to something that's conditional that requires extra review. So we'd like you to go through that list. It's extensive, but focus on if it's one, if it's a dozen, doesn't matter. We'll bring those, when we get that list, we'll generate presentations for each of those uses, come back, explain what they are, how they're defined, where they're allowed in the community, not just Tower Terrace and Highway 13. So you can get a big picture of, how we anticipate development to occur over the next 20 years. Finally, like I said, the table is pretty broad. So if you're looking for where does a flower shop go, it's not gonna be a flower shop. It's very broad. It's retail uses. Where's a gas station go? It might say gas station with pumps, gas stations without pumps. So you have to look through that code list. Again, if you do have questions, let us know and we'll answer those questions. And if we get that list within the next 2 weeks, we hopefully be able to present in September. Yes, sir. Yes.
Council, this, the idea behind this is to try to figure out those items that are catching your attention, you're hearing from your constituents about that perhaps, hey, this, Dave mentioned a flower shop. Where can a flower shop go? Well, if we can identify it on a map, well, that doesn't make sense in that area. We'd like to have regulations that restricts it in this area, but allows it in this area. So we can make sure that's how we, through the use of our codes, implement the vision within the community. So we want to drill down so we can get your input, so we can better fine tune those next steps and those regulations that we need to be looking at to bring before council to consider, to make sure that we're hitting the mark on what the community is looking for the neighborhoods, for the vision, as development continues to occur in our community.
Yeah, so what the new code does, again, with the form-based code, it says, we don't care that it's a flower shop, it's a retail use, but we just want it to look really nice building, et cetera. So, but maybe there are some items to a flower shop that you don't like. You don't like the smell. Well, that's something we should look at because it doesn't quite fit into a quality looking building. So we want to know if it's a gas station, you don't like hours of operation, you don't like the lights, the noise, whatever it could be. Those are the concerns we want to know. We can address it. So that's your homework for the next 2-3 weeks. We'll come back in September and go over those lists, those individual items individually and drill down into each one and see where we have gaps, if there are any. Some completed items that we have accomplished, I think that have helped the community increase the level of design. We've completed the community-wide design standards. That's for the entire community, all the commercial, multifamily and industrial sites. Those are the ones shown on the map there. I didn't include the corridor through 7th Avenue. That's its own special one. And then we have several PUD districts that have their own level of regulations, such as the Easttown Crossing. Then, of course, we obviously adopted the new map and the zoning regulations I mentioned. So next steps, we do have some gaps in our design standards, mainly with the use of metal steel siding, how it's been applied. I think we intended a panel system, but we're seeing more horizontal and vertical steel metal. So we want to close that gap. We need to update our landscaping, lighting, and sign standards. They're quite old. They're good, but as the technology's changed on signs and lighting, our code's not quite keeping up. And landscaping just has a few holes that we need to fill. That just as time evolved, we've seen how it's been implemented, and we want to close those gaps. We, of course, when we're going to begin our comprehensive plan, we did get 4 RFPs. From that one, we're reviewing those now. Comprehensive plan will, of course, guide all of our future development along the corridor, 13, 100, and then all the way to County Home Road. That process will begin in October once we have the RFPs selected. And then finally, we have to look at the homework portion. Again, reviewing the selected uses that you have concerns with or want to know more about. We'll bring those back in September. And then from there, we may be looking at code amendments to address those specific issues. If they're larger issues, we can look at specific ordinances, such as the dispersal ordinance that's come up a few times. We got a lot of strategies we can look at moving forward, depending on the direction you want to take. Any questions?
Questions? Go ahead.
Okay, I've got a few. So when do we approve the design standards a couple months ago? did we have in there that we were gonna review what we had done like 6 months or a year out? Does
Yep.
anyone remember that?
It's 6 months out. That's gonna be part of the next step is to look at some of those projects that we've done. We didn't have we didn't have a lot of good examples to work with. We've got a couple now. So in September, that's one of those updates I'm hoping to do.
Okay,
At the
so
same time, we're talking about uses. I'll just piggyback on that one.
we have a chance to kind of look back on that and say, did we do that or adjust? Okay,
Yep,
that was
in
one-
in September with the homework portion.
Okay, perfect. And this may be what you want us to do in our homework in making our list for part of your presentation later, so I'll throw it out there. Or we want to talk about it now, or is that a Sarah will wait and talk about it as part of the presentation? Feel free to direct however, whatever works, okay? So for the new pieces of this, so help me remember, who defines, when I look at the top of the really large spreadsheet,
Mhm.
zoning districts, is that a state defined definition? Or is that a state defined combined by us definition?
It's probably best practices. Our national organization puts forward quality award-winning definitions, I'll call it. We look at those definitions and make sure they apply to our situation, and then we adopt those definitions.
Okay, so how we come up with, what these various ones are. So it's a little bit we're not directed by the state or whatever of what we have to include where. That's why we're able to look at this and kind of see what fits. So we're
Correct.
looking at what lanes I get to operate in. That's what I'm.
Yeah, I say operating under the lens of Marion. I mean, we took the best definitions we felt were very Midwest definition, high-level definition, a clear definition, and that's what we had very recommended for adoption that I think most people can understand. Now, if we have to tweak that definition, we sure can.
Okay, that was another one. And then, this may be a September conversation, but I think it's come to light when we're defining, you're talking about the aesthetics really of the building and the form-based codes. And does that include, or where does any restriction on sizes of a business come into play?
That's in the zoning code.
That's in the zoning. So that's the difference between the BR and the BC, where you're saying like a Costco or a Hy-Vee fits in that BR, but not that BC.
Correct. In your chart here, and it's small print, but we classify it by specialty retail, which I think is 2,500 square feet. You got small, which is like to 5. You have medium that's up to 30,000 square feet. Then you got large, that's 30,000 square feet and bigger. Don't quote me on those numbers exactly, but that's how it progresses up. So, yeah, and then, so, 100,000 square foot building is not allowed in the BC, but it is allowed in the BR because of the lot sizes, the roadway access, the roadway design would accommodate something bigger
Okay,
than that.
totally get it. So then I'm gonna flip this on another side. I know we don't recruit typically a lot of we don't recruit retail. That kind of happens by demand. But do we know when we're looking at this, the average size of, like, Hy-Vee is never going to build a store that's smaller than X size, or Fairway only goes this size, or some of these other maybe chain retail, large box, that they're never going to go smaller than something. So you're almost deciding what goes where based on what you're allowing for size of a business, based on what you know what I mean?
I think, yeah, correct. We have industry, but there's industry standards that are kind of like, this is a typical, and we've got a list of what a typical Hy-Vee is.
Yeah.
But those those businesses said, well, okay, we have the Walmart Market, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And it's that 30,000 that they can put a Walmart into a smaller area now. It's still a Walmart, but it's just, they got smaller Walmarts now.
They have smaller, okay, so I was curious as we're looking at some of these and you're zoning it, if it's because we kind of know where a certain size.
Yeah, well,
business
yeah,
would
the
go
zoning
or
does,
not
for
go.
the majority of the uses, we know roughly where they can and can't go, just based on how they operate. A Costco, we know where it's gonna go. It's not gonna, it just can't physically fit on Tower Terrace or North Marion, but, so we know that, but there's a lot of models out there that they got all different sizes to fit into different size communities and how bad they want to be in the market.
Okay, all right, homework assignment ready.
So we're gonna look at the sign ordinance.
I'm
you
sorry?
said? The sign ordinance, we'll be looking at that.
Yeah, the sign ordinance is probably one of the things we do have to update. It's got to get some of this other priority stuff done first, but the sign ordinance is coming. It's pretty good, but we've just identified a lot of gaps that we the
When we
technology's
adopted it
changed so
years ago-
much.
Yeah, when
on
we adopted it
signs.
years ago, we
Yeah, the lighting.
said we'd come back and look at tweaking it because it wasn't perfect, but we wanted to have something in place, but I don't know that we ever have.
We have that.
And-
We fixed little pieces here and there. We've never done a
Yeah.
wholesale
Yeah.
correction.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what those gaps are. but-
So Dave, just a clarification on the homework assignment. So let me pick on one line here.
Yep.
It says gas station.
Yep.
Obviously I would have some comments and opinions about that. So are you wanting us to just, like, if I have some concerns or questions about gas station?
Yeah.
Are you wanting me just to circle that one and then we'll have more discussion later?
Yeah.
You want me to write comments down here? I mean, what do you want us to write on this piece of paper?
Number one is, I want to know more about gas stations,
Okay,
how they're allowed, period. And then you might want to say, and so I want to learn more about that. But you could, you could put comments down, say, hey, I want to learn about canopies. I don't care about gas stations, but I care about the canopies. So
Okay.
we can focus in on that. So I want to, I mean, we're gonna let you guys drive, tell me what you want to learn more about from just a basic overview to some detailed, specific, part of that.
If there are concerns, you're driving through a neighborhood and you've got concerns of a drive-through facility or financial institution going in a particular neighborhood. If you see that, flag it and say, I've got a concern about this going here. Or I'd like to know, where can this go? Or what would this look like? What would the regulations be if it was to go here? So we're trying to get as much information from you. We'll tally it up so we can kind of get a sense of, is it a concern amongst everybody? Is there a consensus about it? Because then we know if there's a concern, then we should drill down more and make sure we're having the conversations with you all on what should we do to make sure that it's not a concern and that we're protecting the interests of the community.
And it's not just the use that might be on this list. If you, on your travels, you see something unique or unusual and you want to say, well, I saw this on vacation. What is this? Where would this go? Give us that use and we'll try to figure that out for you as well.
So that's very specific, but what about from a little bit higher level, like transitioning or buffering
Yep.
between single family homes and commercial areas? That, I mean, that's comprehensive plan?
That you're getting more, you're getting a little bit broad, a little higher level. That's more of a comprehensive plan in setting up policies and recommendations on how to proceed further.
Because I think that's something we need to also discuss or look at.
Yep.
Well, you can decide when, but
No, I think that's gonna come out as part of the comprehensive plan. That'll
Okay.
probably be one of the policies and guidelines it recommends. But that's
That-
unfortunately, in all honesty, that comprehensive plan is not gonna be done until March
yeah,
2025.
yeah. Oh, this is good that we're doing all this and,
We got a lot of work to do before that.
and landscaping is another thing that's is a big thing for me, especially on Highway 13. Okay, anyone else?
So if you have items, if you can get them to myself, Ryan or Kim, over the next couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so, we can compile those and start putting a list together and try to hopefully take them all at once, or otherwise we have to piecemeal them out over a couple of meetings, but we'll get it done.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks.
All right, next we have Gary. Discussion regarding vacant building ordinance and policy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, council members. I am here to talk about the vacant building ordinance. So a little bit of background on it. This kind of came about because of some of the vacant buildings up in the Uptown District, 7th Avenue, one on 10th Street. Most of those got, in fact, I think all of them got damaged by derecho. And we've had a few houses around that have gotten damaged, and then all of a sudden they're just not occupied. And then they seem to end up on our radar for code enforcement because they look like they're abandoned. So that's what kind of brought this all about. We really want to try, and with this ordinance, we really want to try and be proactive instead of reactive. We've always been reactive. When we see something or get a complaint from somebody, we always have to go out and we do our investigation and so on. And you guys know a lot of what goes on there. So with this being proactive, it's just going to give us another tool to get people to register their vacant properties so that we can get a plan and hopefully not have them, come on the radar as a neglected property or a code enforcement property. When we were going after the Seventh Avenue, business or the buildings that were neglected, had we had this tool ahead of time, it was quite, likely that it could have been, some of them, maybe all of them could have been avoided, and we would have known what was gonna go on. We could have had a plan and got things going. And really, realistically, sometimes we don't even know that a property is not occupied. It's not until, we have somebody call and complain, or somebody that we drive by and there's tall grass and we have to, go after that, or maybe the building is in need of some maintenance and looks like it's starting to fall apart. We start investigating and we find out that the owners have left town, and when we end up finding them, we end up finding them in Arizona or someplace, and it's crazy. It happens. So we put together a stakeholders group to try and vet this whole process, make sure that we get the ordinance that's best for Marion. We have a couple council members on there, two P and Z members on there, nuisance board, Marion resident. We have a commercial building owner and a commercial and a business owner or business person from uptown. And we have a couple realtors on there. Plus we have our Marion partners with Jill with the chamber and Brooke with uptown and Brady with Medco. So we feel like we got a pretty good mix of people on our stakeholder board. So we've been kind of working with, when we started working with uptown, trying to get these, policy going, something so that we could start having something to go off of. We decided that it probably wasn't just good for the uptown area or the business districts in Marion. It would be good for the whole community. We have had many houses that we've had problems with, that we've had to go after and try and get them to do something with them. And then Brooke had sent me a sheet from the Main Street Iowa group. Ooh, sorry. It was actually dated back in 2013, but it comes to, it still is pretty valid, and the fees, the costs and stuff are probably reasonable, and maybe even more now. So they're losing, when we have a vacant building on the uptown area, they're estimating we could have over $400,000 worth of loss in revenue. Now that could be sales loss from the not having the sales. It could be lost tax revenue to the state or to the city, lost rent from property owners. There's employment in there that we are having people that are not employed, people that are not getting paid, and business loss and many more. There's utilities, advertising, there's all kinds of things that added it up. It's quite an impressive list of, they've done their homework, and it's quite an impressive list. That's not even to say about the businesses that are occupied, that are next door to these vacant buildings. Somebody comes up drives through Main Street on 7th Avenue and they see a building that looks like it's an abandoned. What kind of mindset does that give them? They may not want to stop and shop with the current people that are there. Now, there's been a lot of improvements and things look really nice up there, but we need to take it one step further. And this is not, it's not really directed at neglected properties. It's for all properties, but neglected properties are the one that seemed like this is going to really help. And hopefully we will curb that before they get to neglected state. So we have done a few things. So we're going to ask everybody to register if they have a vacant building. There's some exceptions. If a building is for sale or house is for sale by a realtor that's licensed in the state of Iowa, we're not going to require them to register their property because it is for sale. Now, if it gets to a neglected state, then we're going to have to deal with that, but generally they don't. So that's usually not a problem. If it's a property that's been abandoned because of storm damage, we're going to give them, 90 days or something. We have a meeting coming up. We'll decide what that number is going to be, but we're going to give them about 90 days or so to get with their insurance company, figure out what they're going to do, get a plan, and come back to us and tell us what their plan is and how they're going to get it occupied again. And then the other thing that we're kind of gonna to waive on is, so we have many residents in the city of Marion, is like every other city does, that they want to go south for the winter. They want to leave for an extended amount of time. It's not in our interest to have them pay a fee to register their property to tell us that they're not going to be there for 6 months or 5 months or whatever. But we do want them to, register the property. This will help police and fire. If there was an incident at that property and nobody is living there at the time, it would give us some contact information, not only the person that owns it and a number for them, but hopefully somebody in the city of Marion or surrounding area that is taking care of that for them and making sure that it's taken care of, to give us a number for them. So we will probably be, I went too far. We will be charging fees for these, or we're proposing to charge fees for these. Don't really know what that dollar amount looks like at this point in time, but we figure there needs to be a cost involved with that. And then there'll also be a fee for inspection. When somebody registers a property with us and they do their work, they get it all done, then we will go in and want to do an inspection before it's occupied again, whether that's a house or a business or what. Now, if they have to get a permit for their work, then that's going to take care of that, and that wouldn't apply. And we're also talking about possibly doing, a penalty fee for if they don't register it, and we have a problem getting them to register, that there's a fee that covers our work for trying to get that taken care of too. So our next steps, we're going to take any comments that you guys have. We're going to meet with our group, our stakeholders group again, and go over everything, go back through it. This is going to have an ordinance with a policy, and the policy is going to direct us how to take care of the ordinance. So there's two facets of this we're trying to work through. So we'll get that. And then we're hoping that we can bring back a recommendation late August or early September for your approval. So any questions?
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead.
Not a question as much as a comment. I just want to thank Gary and his team, and all of the stakeholders that have been part of this. I've been on this group as well too, kind of monitoring and watching and participating in this. This is just going to give us an opportunity to be on a platform to collaborate with property owners. It's going to give us a little bit more hands-on and helping them through their issues, whatever their concerns are, whatever's caused, these buildings to be put in the position that they are, and just really frame it up more in a positive manner for us to help them through that. And by the same token too, it's going to help the city move through that process as well too, because as we all know, abandoned property is not good for anybody, and especially when it comes to the emergency services. So, if something like that were to happen, we've come to find that we've got a lot of property owned by people that reside out of our state now, and it's becoming challenging to track down the true owners and those that are managing these properties. So anyway, just want to say thank you and kind of share that thought with everyone that's here today and watching. And I really kind of am excited about this this change that we've taken that role in. So thanks, Gary.
And yeah, I agree with Randy as well. I think being proactive in this, just like everything, will help avoid some of the issues that we've had recently. But I was wondering, do we have like a pretty solid number or like an estimate of overall vacant properties or neglected properties? And then I was wondering, are those two words kind of interchangeable at this point, or what kind of separates vacant from neglected?
You could repeat that last part of that, because the
Yeah.
two parts of.
I'm just curious if we know like do we have an estimation of how many vacant properties there are in the city? And then I'm wondering, is vacant and neglected, are those like interchangeable words here, or is there like a for sure difference between what we consider a vacant property and what we consider a neglected property?
We don't know how many in the city of Marion are abandoned or empty at this point in time. I can give you some estimates, and it'd be just a round guess, but I can think of probably about 10 right off the top of my head, and that's the ones we know about. And then the neglected, you said neglected and abandoned or
Neglected and vacant, are those?
vacant, okay. So there's a difference because vacant property is just one that's not occupied. And it could be something that's taken care of by, an owner, or maybe they're gone, but they have somebody around that's taking care of it. Neglected is one that's just not being taken care of. It's the property, maybe the grass, maybe tall weeds, it could be, many things. It could be, the house is just starting to show some wear on the outside and siding is falling off or whatever. And that's would term it to be a neglected property then.
Okay. So it's kind of like squares and rectangles where not all neglected properties are necessarily vacant.
Right.
But in the
Yeah.
other way around. too.
Well, that's true because there are neglected properties that are occupied and those are,
Okay.
that's a completely different, another story. So,
I'm caught up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, Gary, I'm in complete support of what you're proposing as far as dealing with vacant and neglected properties. The only other comment I will make, I like the idea if you got a snowbird and they're gonna go south for, 3 to 5 months or whatever that period of time is, that they can somehow get on some registration list and the police and fire know if something happens, there's a contact there. I like that. I'm not sure it's worth a fee for that. And hopefully it's an easy process for them just to go online, put their name and address in there and say, I'm gone from this time to this time. But to me, that's just kind of hopefully something that,
so the exemptions would be, we would not charge fees for those.
okay,
So the buildings for sale, if they wanted to register them, they could. The buildings that are damaged by storms, we want them to come up with a plan. But as long as they've got a plan coming, once they get their insurance stuff moving along, then that's when, and then the residents that would go south for the winter, we definitely we're not going to be charging them.
okay,
We have even talked about doing a database, whether it's just an Excel spreadsheet and
Right.
sharing it with police and fire so everybody knows, not everybody, but the people that need to know, will be able to know whether there's a property that's, vacant. So,
yeah, we've invested a lot of money in software in different areas. So
Right.
hopefully there's some nice, easy system
yeah,
that they can just go online and register and
right.
make it
Well,
nice and easy.
One of the softwares we're looking at has vacant property in it. So we'll see
Okay.
if that's one of them we end up with or not. But yeah, you're right. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to just go into our software and put it in there. So,
Very good. Thank you.
yep.
I'm just curious, the $400,000 figure you shared, is that, what length of period of time is that? 6 months, a year, 5 years?
I'm assuming it's a year.
Oh.
So, I mean, I would think it would have to be, but I don't remember, whether it actually said in the sheet or not, but I mean, I can share that with you.
No,
I'm
I
sure
was
Brooke
I'm
can
just
share it,
curious.
but
It's not
I'm sure
really-
it's a year. So,
Oh, Brooke said yes. Okay.
Yeah. all right.
1 year. Okay, thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
Looks like we have an item that we're voting on tonight.
We do. Could we at least before we go into that, have an explanation why we have this on the agenda on Tuesday night?
I believe we are down a few members on Thursday night and we need the 5, Kara?
We need 6.
We need 6 to make to approve the action.
Oh, so
because
we're
we're
short
suspending the
on
rules.
Thursday night for
Correct.
members here.
Correct, we'll be short on Thursday.
Follow you. Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 23-20, rezoning property from Lynn County Agriculture and USR Urban Services Residential to SR2 Suburban Medium Density Single Family Residential for property located north of East Robbins Road and west of Albinet Road in Marion, Iowa. This is brought by Fraser Land Investments LLC, and this is the second consideration.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 23-20. Rezoning property from Lynn County Ag and Urban Services Residential to suburban medium density, single family residential for property located north of East Robbins Road and west of Albinet Road. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. The motion is approved.
Mayor, I make a motion to suspend the rules and proceed to the final consideration of ordinance number 23-20.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to suspend the rules and proceed to the final consideration of ordinance number 23-20. Discussion. I guess I will just ask, what's the urgency?
This is a result of one of our staff's mistakes on the notification requirements, and we set the developer back about 2 weeks. And I know it's June, but I'm sorry, I know it's July, but he's already worried about winter charges. 2 weeks makes quite a difference in to getting concrete in by the end of the year.
Any other discussion on suspending the rules, concerns? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to suspend the rules and proceed to final consideration for ordinance number 23-20, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion is approved.
Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 23-20, rezoning property from Lynn County AG Agriculture and USR Urban Services Residential to SR2 Suburban Medium Density Single Family Residential for property located north of East Robbins Road and west of Albernet Road, Marion, Iowa. Fraserland Investments LLC, final consideration.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the final consideration of ordinance number 23-20. Rezoning the property from Lynn County Ag and Urban Services Residential to suburban medium density, single family residential for property north of East Robbins Road and west of Albernet Road. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the final approval of ordinance number 23-20, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion is approved. Next item on the agenda is discussion for the Thursday agenda. First item that's marked for discussion by staff is on page 5, which is item E1 under engineering. Any item prior to E1 that anyone has questions on or would like to discuss? Do you have something, Seth?
Yes, Your Honor. On A8, that grant request, that's for 900,000. That's over a 3-year period, and that is a request that we're making for the full amount. And it doesn't just go for the trees, but also for the planting and maintenance of those trees for over the first couple years of it. So just wanted to let you all know that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks for that. Any other questions on any item prior to E1? Okay, E1, Mr. Bartolo.
Yes, Your Honor. So I just wanted to come up, just because this is a somewhat complex request. So up on the screen, the original detention basin is the area that's hatched in all red. So you can see some of this line right here, those of you that are familiar with the annexation agreement, is the line between C. So this is kind of the area C on the annexation agreement. So at the time, we did not know whether this area west of that annexation line was going to come into Cedar Rapids or Marion. And so the boundary is then just the orange color when we actually did the access fee for that. So the reason the basin was oversized, and then it was determined that maybe we can't get the money for that portion if it goes to Cedar Rapids. And so we only did the portion that we knew for sure was going to go into the city of Marion. With this, and I'll actually back up to Dave's slide. I know some of the questions. So right now, all this water, there's an existing box culvert that we're building underneath Tower Terrace currently. So everything on the north side will go into that existing drainage way that's there today, go through that box culvert, and then there's actually an easement that goes in these backyards here. And then when we built this culvert on Mulberry Drive, we actually oversized that. And so then that drainage way continues, and then this is the actual detention basin back here. So this was all oversized for that. That culvert was put in a larger size than needed, with the assumptions that this development would not have detention on it because we're providing it as part of this detention. So well planned in the past, but we kept the area smaller because we didn't think we would actually gain that revenue from it. So they're basically saying you designed it for us, we want to use it, we're willing to pay that amount to use that. So a little complex, but we just want to make sure that everyone understood that.
Okay. Are there any questions on that one? Okay, thank you, Mike. Any questions on E2 or E3? Okay, Dave, F1.
Schwartzberger and Shine on 11th Street is seeking approval for an awning placement above their front windows, the front facade windows. New awnings are considered a substantial improvement in the uptown corridor, the uptown district. So anytime there's new awnings or a new facade, it'll come to the city council. The applicant is looking at a pergola style awning shown in the illustration to the left to extend not more than 4 feet from the face of the building. It will be black in nature to match the black trim on the building. And it'll be a minimum of 8 feet from grade to meet building requirements. The Marion Planning and Zoning Commission looked at this last week and determined that the proposal does meet the underlying requirements. And the building not being historic, the pergola did not draw away from a historic facade. So they recommended approval 4-0. The Planning Commission also looked at it last week and recommended 7-0 approval.
Any questions? Steve?
Yeah, real quick, how far out from the building did you say that's gonna
Not
come?
more than 4 feet.
Oh, okay, all right.
You said 8 foot high. Is that the awning itself or is that the arms,
The arms would have to be at least 8 feet to meet the code
the
requirements.
bottom of the arm?
Correct.
8 foot. Okay, and then does that restaurant, does it have a blade sign? Or is it just the sign in the
I think it's just on the windows, as I recall.
No, there's.
Is there something above it?
blade?
Yeah, there's a blade sign.
Okay. One in that picture.
It's,
that's
it's,
why.
it's around. It's around,
Alright.
yeah.
We'll have to, the sign may have to move then, if that's the case.
Go ahead, Randy.
Thank you. Dave, we're in the process of obviously just on the 7th Avenue corridor, do we have an adopted awning program already? I know that was a discussion in the past, but all of these that'll be off of the 7th Avenue will need to be approved and they can mix and match whatever they want as long as it's approved through P and Z.
Correct. Any awning in the uptown area will ultimately come to the city council, so long as it encroaches over to the public right away. So if the building's set back, we don't have to worry about the awnings that way, but anything encroaching over the public sidewalk will have to come to the council for approval.
Do we have a standardized
We don't.
design for 7th Avenue?
We don't.
Okay, I thought we were I was thinking we were considering that because I know there was some people that were wanting awnings on 7th Avenue and we were in the discussion of that.
If you did, I wouldn't I can look into it.
I was just
I don't recall.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds as if though anything that wants to be done, but there is no standardized.
There is no standard. I think it'd be hard to standardize awnings in terms of you'd want something to match historic facades versus modern facades. So I think we want to keep it fairly broad, and as long as we're reviewing it to the council, P and Z, the HBC, P and Z and city council, I think we're protecting our, making sure that we're getting high quality products.
Thank you. The fabric ones that were on 7th Avenue and previously though that were matching, was that just because the owners at the time all agreed to do those together at the same time?
That was the mauling of Main Street back in the 80s and 90s where they were trying to create unified looks. and
Okay,
that's
so
what
those
we
were
got.
just relished items from the past.
That was the mauling of Main Street, I think is what they call it. So
Perfect. Okay, that's what I was getting confused. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions on that item? Okay, the next item that's marked for discussion is E1 on page 7. Any questions on any item prior to E1? Okay, Kara, E1?
Thank you. Good evening, council. A few cycles ago, city staff presented a proposed agreement for an easement and maintenance covenant that would transfer the maintenance of basins to be a private matter rather than having them all dedicated to the city and having us take on that maintenance. And in order to do that, our next steps were that we would need to amend our code and amend the policy. So we are asking you to consider these amendments to the code this week, which would be our next step in implementing that change.
Questions on that? Go ahead, Sarah.
Can you help me remember, is this going forward or retroactive?
This is moving forward.
Moving forward. So those that are already there are under current. So this is just as we move forward. So somebody knows what they're getting into.
That's correct.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
So if there is a existing detention pond and the city's maintaining it, but let's say the HOA asks to take it over, is that in here at all? Or,
That would not be necessarily covered by this, since we would have a method for moving that forward in the future. We would be able to transfer that ownership if they requested it. We would do that by a different MOU than the general one, but we could also do a covenant similar to that. It just wouldn't be required. This would be required for future developments,
Sure.
but the option is absolutely there.
thanks.
Yeah, and that would be something we would bring forward and council would have the option to approve at that time.
Thank you, Kara. Any questions on items F1 through F5? Okay, F6, Nicole. F6 through F8.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So the applicant is seeking a variance to waive the code regulations related to the length of a cul-de-sac. So the cul-de-sac in question is Timber Ridge Court, and that is a part of the Jacobs Landing addition. The cul-de-sac, or I should say code, says that cul-de-sac should not exceed 600 feet in length. This one has been designed at 779 feet in length. So per our subdivision of land regulations, within that code section, there is a method for going about this. So it's through the variance process to waive it. With variances, the council needs to be looking at, does the hardship exist for the property owner? So with that, the applicant did provide in their request what they thought was their hardships with this property and the 600-foot requirement of a cul-de-sac. So the existing subdivisions. Oh, geez, wrong button. So on the west side and then on the east side, when those were developed, neither of them had a stub street put in for future connection of this portion of Jacobs Landing addition. Nowadays, we do look at connectivity when developments are being kind of planned out for things like this. Their second kind of hardship they pointed out was that along Tower Terrace Road there is an access management plan that limits the access onto that road. So they are not permitted to have access onto Tower Terrace Road from the south. And then they did look at having a looped street on the southern portion of the development. However, separation standards didn't work. They weren't able to fit a looped street in. So their only option was to have an extended cul-de-sac or to have really large or kind of oddly shaped lots towards that bulb section. So staff did review this. There weren't any concerns raised. We did feel that the applicant met and proved kind of their hardships with this property or portion of their Jacobs Landing addition. This is kind of why that variance process is in place. And we feel that this is suitable and an appropriate request for the situation.
Questions?
Quick one. Nicole, what is the reason for the 600-foot limitation? Why that number?
I would think it's
I'll tackle it
safe.
from a couple of areas and Mike can weigh in too, but historically, 600 feet, it's always, it used to be hose length on a, you have the hydrant at the intersection. Then it evolved into snow removal. You get 800-900 feet long cul-de-sacs. You're putting a lot of snow into the bulb. Were some of the historical reasons that we've had that in the code.
Okay.
What about just safety and being able to
It
get
gets
out
into
of the
safety, number
neighborhood?
of units with one way in. It's a host of items.
This is a pretty standard regulation in zoning code or subdivision codes, in other communities as well.
For these lots, they are a little larger than what we would standardly
Right.
see in common, more medium density, zoning districts, even though this is gonna be medium density, the lots are larger. There's 16 lots, off this cul-de-sac.
Questions?
I would like to ask Chief Fagan a question. I have a little concern when properties purchased like this and then we're asking for these variances after the fact rather than planning it before the purchase is made. So here we are, we're moving this through the process and then we're asking for these deals here. Chief, do you, in review of this, apparatuses going down here, dealing with dwelling fires, staging units in such a large capacity, your thoughts on this?
I'd have to check with Jason on the review. The density of positioning apparatus is always going to be a concern on the room that's available. East Robbins Road, and if we have to extend apparatus back that far, right? The effective response force, I would be interested as we're looking into the future on some things that looking into the future for aid agreements and automatic aid, looking at apparatus placement, not only that, but also with the current response model of personal vehicles, of off-duty responders coming to the scene. I see there being less of a footprint moving into the future than what has been in place in the past. So I would need to check with Jason in comparison to previous experiences. But again, Randy, looking into the future, I see us using less of a footprint than what we would be seeing today.
Right, thank you. These are always things that I'm looking at. We had this rule of thumb in the past. It was 2 entrances in and out for these types of things. And as we extend these, we are creating more issues with that. And as the footprint of the city keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and we're looking at developers wanting to buy these pieces of property and then going in, I'm seeing this in my neighborhood. I see these a lot where, we're trying to make good space out of these pieces of land, but then, I'm looking at it from the eyes of services, putting hydrants in there, all those types of things. These concern me to come in and ask for these variances and grant these, and it causes me to pause to agree with those, but it's just, it's concerning.
If I may, Mayor, clarify with Randy.
Please go ahead.
I just want to clarify your concern and question for me. Is your concern in regards to apparatus placement extending onto Robbins Road due to an emergency on this street?
Yeah, great question, and thank you. I'm just, simulating a fire at the northernmost part to this. Obviously, we're not going to have access coming in off of Tower Terrace. We look at the placement of where the dwellings are going to be on this. And in our particular case, right, we have paid on-call volunteers that are showing up in their personally owned vehicles. Where do they park? How do they get there? If they park on East Robbins Road, that means they have to pack in from East Robbins Road to the northest part where their services are going to be requested. And it's not only that, what about ambulance services? You start jamming these roads up with huge fire trucks, ambulances, police are trying to get in there and protect scenes. Those are the concerns that I have when we have these cul-de-sacs that are being set up like this. And I totally am in agreement with maintaining that 600 foot. when you've laid 4-inch line on the ground, you have a total new perspective of what your distance is to fire hydrants. So I know we'll have hydrants up in there, but again, it's just neighborhoods, limited parking, everything compounds into this. Snow removal, think about a snow plow trying to get through there and removing 3 inches of snow. Where does it go? Where do you push it? Those are all things that are compounded into these that I look from safety, services, they all roll into that. And then again, I'm bringing up questions as we move through this to approve this. These are the things that we take a look at, so.
Thank you, Randy, for that clarification. I would echo your comments for the concerns in regards to the footprint of our response model broadly across our community and even into some of our rural areas through agreements into the township. Specifically speaking to this instance, the effective response force of sending 3 fire apparatus that we have in the city. A working fire is also going to get a fire apparatus from Cedar Rapids. But that model is actually a smaller model than we've historically had with the medics and the fire apparatus and multiple other units responding in addition to the paid on call. So in regards to this model, we will likely have to do some traffic control on Robbins Road to account for the effective response force. But that is something that we can pre-plan for and work with our law enforcement partners to ensure the safety of our firefighters.
Perfect, thank you. That might have been just the triggering comment that might change the thought process on that. If like you said, if our procedures, would call for in those particular areas there to have more, control over those particular areas and limiting in and out and who's going in and out during those times of critical time and care. That's important. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. That's a huge comment.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Randy. I had those same concerns about safety, so thanks for leading us through that thought process. Go ahead.
Yeah, Nicole, one clarification. So since this is longer than the 600 feet, is this gonna have a fire hydrant at the south end and one further up at the north end? Will it have 2 on that stretch?
I would have to look closer at the plan, and the plan of improvements that have been submitted to the engineering department to see where they've specifically located them. But that's all reviewed with the water department and with the fire department on where those hydrants need to be placed accordingly.
Okay, so we'll accept the review. Very good.
Anyone else?
So F7, is do you want to read
Sorry?
do you want to read the agenda item title, or do you just want me to keep going?
I think keep going to F7.
So Jacob's Landing preliminary plat, again, it's the one we've been talking through. They're seeking approval for about just under 28 acres of property with 57 single-family residential homes. So the north half, and north of Tower Terrace Road would have 41 single-family lots on it. The south one being that cul-de-sac, 16 single-family residential lots on it. So the proposed preliminary plat does align with the future land use map of our comprehensive plan, and it does align with the SR2 zoning district. So because it is such a long north-south plat, north on the screen will be towards your left. So getting into public utilities and stormwater management, we'll start with the water service. So water service is relatively nearby. It's just off the screen there at the end of Hawks Ridge Court. The developer will bore under East Robbins Road to connect onto that public water main, pull it under East Robbins and up kind of along that ditch line to the development. And then for sanitary sewer services, that was stubbed out from Morel Court when that subdivision went in. Again, that service has been provided basically right by the plat line. Going into the stormwater management. So the green arrows kind of show where that drainage easement that Mike had talked about for the Dry Creek detention basin kind of flows through. And it is kind of an existing kind of wet area through there. The engineering firm for the applicant does recognize that that is where that water will flow. As Mike stated, under Tower Terrace Road through that culvert and then into the basin. The blue dashed lines heading both towards Tower Terrace Road, the applicant's engineer has designed a swale. So the back of all those lots, water runoff will flow down that swell and not go on to existing properties along Meadow Knolls Road. So at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, neighbors that did show up had a lot of concerns about the water that not only runs kind of along the back there, but also kind of in that Tower Terrace Road area. So the applicant and their engineer kind of did look at all the water runoff. They believe they've found solutions to help mitigate that runoff from going on to the existing property owners to the west. So for environmentally sensitive areas, really the main one here is that there is wetlands on the property, outlined here in green. With this development, they will not disturb any of that wetland area. If they did, it'd be a bigger process that it would need to go through. So they're not touching that. When the homes get developed here, they will be staying out of that area as well. There is, I should mention, some kind of steep slopes near this area of the plat. With the grading of the overall site, the applicant is planning on kind of knocking that steep slope down just to make for better residential lots with those two lots there. For the street and trail network, and they've got the cul-de-sac coming off of East Robbins Road. And then on the north side of Tower Terrace, they do have one access point that will lead into that north section. Like I had mentioned before, we do require, when feasible, stubbing streets onto undeveloped land. So they are proposing that stub there to the east, along with one to the north that will connect in to a Cedar Rapids subdivision. So that north portion will be connected via the road network pretty well. Sidewalks will be required when building permits get pulled internally along Tower Terrace Road. There are 10-foot side paths that are going in with that Tower Terrace Road project, not a part of this development. However, along East Robbins Road, the applicant will put in the sidewalk there. Staff did mail out 46 courtesy postcards for this preliminary plat. We haven't heard anything regarding the plat since P and Z on this. So there may be people here on Thursday for it. But again, at P and Z, there was quite a few people that had concerns regarding the stormwater runoff. So the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of this preliminary plat 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Sarah.
You mentioned on the, I guess it's gonna be the east side of the cul-de-sac. Right? Where they're gonna knock down, make that, change the elevation a little bit to allow for the housing. Does that technically then on the east, there are houses in that neighboring development. So obviously we protect that doesn't run into them, right? I mean, I know that.
Right. I think the grading is going to change that much. They're basically going to kind of take off the top of the mounted hill in that area.
Okay, and then, so you said the sidewalk. So will people be crossing Tower Terrace Road between these two on a sidewalk? Or you said under, or will?
There's a 10-foot side path, so kind of like a.
Tower Terrace.
Yes.
But there's no way to get from the cul-de-sac neighborhood to that, right?
Correct.
Because that would be people's backyards.
Yes,
So we haven't allowed for anything there.
they'd have to trump through the wetlands.
Okay, and so where,
So
along Tower Terrace, it would be up to Mulberry, the next,
mhm.
it's that next entrance point on that Barnsley Circle that would be the next entrance point to Tower Terrace from these neighborhoods, if I've got it in my head correctly.
Either that or Meadow Knolls. As Tower Terrace splits that subdivision. However, there's not gonna be sidewalk installed east or west of this. There is on the south side of East Robbins Road.
That was my next question, because I actually walk this occasionally. And I know it's on the south side of East Robbins Road. So when you said they were putting in a sidewalk, it's gonna be a sidewalk in that section, but it's just gonna kind of be a section of sidewalk that doesn't connect to anything because, okay,
Either the developer is required to put it in or ask for a deferral. So instead of asking for that deferral from council, they're just gonna install the sidewalk.
okay. Is the housing style, obviously, the north side are smaller, or is it just bigger lots, same size houses on the south side?
Or is what size of house gets built, ultimately. We don't know. The lots are larger off that cul-de-sac than, in along Tower Terrace Road. Than when you get a little further north into that northern section or the interior loop section, there are smaller lots. But ultimately, it could be same size of house.
Just a thought.
Mhm.
Because what is the size of the lots in like that in the middle section on that north side?
So the size of lots for the overall development range, just under a quarter acre to just under 1.5 acres. So the ones that are closer to that 1.5 acre size are gonna be these back in this area. The ones on the north side, kind of along the east, in the middle, they're gonna be closer to that quarter acre size. The size of it, does meet those bulk regulations of that SR2 district.
So on the north section, the access to that neighborhood from Tower Terrace, obviously that's just half a road there. So the other half would be in the next
Correct.
lot.
Correct. The north portion, the developer does know that it's gonna be a few years before they're able to develop on the north side of Tower Terrace Road, just due to water main, due to connectivity. I do not recall if they've gotten an easement for the other side.
That was my question, is how is that gonna get built if that's someone else owns that land and is that Marion or is that still county?
It's county
That's
today, so there is a portion on that Tower Terrace. We are building the access point. So it's a shared access point between the two property owners. And we'll extend that so far with our paving project, but we'll stop it.
Right.
And so they'll extend it to the north. So there is an easement. It's hard to tell over that drawing, but
But the property owner to the east would not have to build that half of the road without,
we'll have to get into those at this point, it's only plating. So when we get to the plan of improvements, they have to have a way in or out that fire is gonna be okay with, or they can't proceed.
you've got it to the north into that Cedar Rapids neighborhood, but nothing to the east. Technically. Right now. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, technically Tower Terrace doesn't exist yet, so.
Well, what Mike's saying is that they'll have to satisfy the fire department and all the other departments before they can develop the property, so. Okay,
Yeah, at the time of final plating, when the developer is ready to move to that next step, more of those details get kind of finessed out, what's been built, what agreements are needed. what is fire going to allow? Has the subdivision in Cedar Rapids been built out? So there's a lot of factors that can change between the preliminary plat and when the developer is ready to final plat that section.
Okay. Thank you. Next item.
So Boulevard Apartments, is seeking kind of reapproval of their final site development plan. Because it is zoned planned unit development, that final site development plan process is required for overall site layout, building elevations, which does include that material, appearance, color, that sort of thing. So the applicant is requesting that change in facade material specifically for a portion of the apartment building. So the revised kind of portion of the building that we are looking at is highlighted in red. So the top image is what was approved back in March of 2022 by City Council. So it's kind of the base along the building, both the front and then both sides as well. And then kind of that entrance point. So the bottom image shows that 2D rendering of what they're kind of requesting. So staff became aware of the material change in May during conversations around their monument sign. Once we did become aware of the change in material that was applied to the base and around the entrance point of the building, we notified the applicant that staff felt it was a substantial change in appearance for the material and that formal review and consideration by council would need to happen. So this kind of goes into specifics on what you did approve, again, back in March of 2022. Those top two images were included within that revised final site development plan elevation packet that you received. If you recall, that's not what they originally submitted. You tabled their item, asked them to go back, revise their elevations. This is what they brought back and what you ultimately approved. So the product is Mac Metal Architecture's Polymac style in smoked birch. It does come in two sizes, which is on the screen in the lower left-hand corner. In the lower right-hand corner is what was submitted with the building plans that our building department had received for review. So with final site development plans, as planning staff, we look at what you had approved through that process and we compare it to what's been submitted with the construction plans to our building division. So on that bottom right, you can see that they've called out that Mac Metal Polymac in the 20-inch by 72-inch panel. Even though they're submitted to you guys in your packet, the top two, the elevation and that image from from one of the projects on the manufacturer's website didn't specifically call out the panel size or that manufacturer style specifically. When staff looked up what was called out in the construction plans, it matched perfectly for what was approved. So the Polymac panel system does provide for architectural interest. It provides for a different shape, a different pattern than that adjacent kind of blue-gray horizontal lap siding that you can see in that top left image. This manufacturer does provide for, in that smoked birch color, a horizontal siding through their Harrywood or their Harrywood Plus series. So this is showing what is being requested. The top right image shows what has been installed on the building. Again, the one on the left is that 2D rendering. And then that bottom right shows a closer up image of how that horizontal siding is installed. So it's not lap siding, doesn't have that overlap look. It's more of a smooth abutment to each piece. So this product is by Royal Building Products in their cedar rendition style. Their color is smoke wood. the smoked birch from what was approved to what this color is. I've got an example on the next slide. They're very close in color. But this product and their style for the series only comes in a 6-inch by 12-foot piece. So your standard horizontal siding size. They do not have a panel option for the cedar renditions line. So this is just going into the very specifics between what was approved in that middle column versus what's been installed. The main thing here is that panel or that piece size. Again, 20-inch by 72 is what was called out in the construction plans and what was shown to you in the approved plan through that final site development plan process. And what's been installed is a 6-inch by 12-foot horizontal piece. So here's that color comparison on the right. So the smoked birch, which was approved, versus the smoked wood, which has been installed. And then that image on the left is just a closer up image of what is currently on the building. So staff again thought what was approved by council through the final site development process versus what was installed did have a substantial difference in appearance due to that panel size. And that is why we are bringing it back to you for consideration.
So I'm curious, why did they make the change? Did they say? Cost?
Part of it was lead time on the panel material. Part of it from learning at the Planning and Zoning Commission, there was a discrepancy in what they had in some of their specs or design finished documents versus what their design team had put on the elevations for the submittal to the council. So what they had in their kind of finish element documents that called out paint colors, that called out the color of the carpet, they had in there their Harrywood style for that same manufacturer in the top left, which again, they have that smoked birch in horizontal. That is what they had called out in their design specs, but the architect or designer that drew up the elevations was based off of a brochure. And so the communication, I think, between the two documents wasn't quite there.
So it was unintentional?
In their minds, they thought they were asking for the horizontal, even though the exhibits did show the panel. They will have a representative here on Thursday. You have
So when did
specific.
they realize that it was different from, or did they not realize it? You caught it.
We pointed out during the sign discussion for the monument that what they were wanting to use was not what had been approved for the building.
And anyone else? Go ahead.
Yeah, the comment I'll give them on Thursday is I specifically remember our discussion
Yeah.
on the first design of this. And we had a lot of comments saying this thing looks just like a regular apartment building, residential siding and with the kind of look that we didn't want. And so what they put on here was exactly what we talked about that we didn't like. And so we were looking for something a little bit different, and they came up with the upper left, and you got some of the different designs and patterns. And what they put on there, I don't know if it's, you're saying it's the same color. I, again, based on those pictures, I disagree, but, based on that, you're saying they look similar. I agree with that. But, the distinction between a 6-inch panel and a 20-inch is pretty substantial. So, I don't think they did, in my opinion, they didn't do what they said they were going to do. And I've got a problem with that. And I'll be happy to let them know that on Thursday as well.
What's the recourse though at this point?
Recourse is they do what they said they were gonna do.
Yeah, if it is not approved, then they look at taking it off the building, doing what was approved.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get to is that they not realize it? Because you said the designer, there was a discrepancy between what those.
That
and
is,
what the design-
yeah, what the
I mean, or
applicant
did,
stated.
or did they just know that it was different and they just did it anyway?
At the Planning and Zoning Commission, the applicant did state that, when he was looking through all their documentation, city staff doesn't receive the thick binder of this is the color of paint they're using, so it's not something that we would have ever seen or catch, to call out that discrepancy any earlier. But that is what the explanation was to the commission, was that there was a discrepancy between the two different documents and what they thought they were asking for and what the council and what staff was expecting to see as a product.
Anyone else? Unfortunately, I'm not here on Thursdays. Go
If
ahead.
I'm not mistaken, the monumental sign is made out of the same product, wasn't it? And that's why we caught it. So it was kind of they were proceeding until perhaps forgiveness was asked.
Yeah, as soon as staff was aware of what they wanted to use on the monument sign, we said, hold up. This doesn't look like it was approved, or what was approved, and that formal review would need to occur. And I hope that sign is not up.
And we had TIF dollars in this project.
Yes.
I
Go ahead.
concur with you all. I mean, this is an entry, it's not entry, it's an entry point. I mean, some people don't realize it's an entry point, but that was a big concern. Is it been great to take an empty lot and turn it into something? Yes. The designs of the playground and all the pieces around it look great. Nice to have? Yes. I think we're putting a lot in changing entry points and doing a lot of work to make this work, and it's disappointing. I think there was even a mark on the side of it. I'm assuming that's fixed. There was a bunch of white on the siding on the
Still
side.
there. Well,
Still
that's
there?
Yeah.
I noticed that when I drive by there, I was like, somebody spilled something. I assume that's gonna get fixed. But I concur. This is not a spot we want to be in, considering the amount of discussion we had about the look of this. And even then, I feel like we're kind of conceding to make it work compared to what we wanted to push, so. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Nicole. One more item for Dave.
All right, this would be a resolution approving the final site development plan for the Holiday Inn Express and Suites. It's located on the, kind of hard to see the red dash lines out there just east of Quick Star. We approved this initially back in 2018 with a different branded hotel. They came back in 2020 with the Holiday Inn Express. That was approved at City Council. However, those are only good for 2 years due to COVID, supply chain, and not getting financing for hospitality. The project sat, so it has to come back to the council for reconsideration. As we look at the site plan, there's only one significant change, and that is reduction in parking. They went from 104 to 94 parking spots. A minimum of 93 is required for this facility. I know I've been talking about parking on the site since it began. However, we've got an excess amount of parking now. So ideally, if you're a resident or staying at the hotel, you're going to walk over to Daisy's Garage or one of the other fast food restaurants in that location. They've got excess parking around the private drive now that are essentially fair game for anybody to use. So as an overall site, we are now parking it correctly. If we were to get a situation where we had contractors show up and eat up a lot of the parking with trailers and whatnot, there'd be a re-impact, but that's usually going to impact every hotel. So Site plan does not change at all, other than the elimination of some parking spots. We did get a photometric site plan of the site. It does have zero cutoff at the north, because we do have residents to the north there. Elevations are the other item that change. The colors are the same, the flow, the pattern is all the same, but we do switch. They are proposing to switch from an EFS system that was about 45% of the entire facade to an LP smart siding. We've seen that smart siding elsewhere on the site. It's not a material that we'd necessarily allow in other districts in the community due to our design standards. But the 13 and Highway 151 had very specific design standards, and it does allow the LP smart siding. Same with EFS. That's not a material we would allow at 45% anywhere else in the community. But the 13 and 151 development had its own rules and regulations that had to go by. So it's really just a switch of materials. Again, the elevations do not change. Typical hotel with the drop off, covered drop off, patio to the backside. There'll be some just general lounging amenities out there as well. Planning and Zoning Commission did meet on this last month and did recommend approval of the request, or sorry, last week, and did recommend approval of the request.
I will let the Deputy Mayor Pro Tem handle the questions on this.
Comments, questions? Concerns? Does it have a pool?
I'm sorry, it does have, it has a pool, it's indoor pool, fitness center, open multi-purpose lobby, business center, market and sundry shop, complimentary breakfast, outdoor patio space, and a covered drop-off.
Wow. No event center.
No event center. Yeah.
Maybe the next,
Maybe south.
to the south, maybe an event center.
And they would have started this last week if I would have let them, so they're ready to get a building permit issued on this project.
Looks nice. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to upcoming agenda review. Oh, no, we just did that, sorry. Closed session.
Mayor, move to adjourn to closed session regarding litigation as permitted under sections 21.51C of the Code of Iowa.
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Sternad, seconded by Councilmember Menzer. To adjourn to closed session regarding litigation as permitted under the Code of Iowa. May we have the legal counsel's statement, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have reviewed the proposed subject matter for closed session and find the same to be appropriate under Iowa Code Section 21.51C.
Thank you. Discussion before we vote. Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Miskman,
Yes.
Mr. Jensen,
Yes.
Mayor Abalosely,
Yes.
Mr. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Menzer,
Yes.
Mr. Sterned.
Yes.
We're now adjourned to closed session. Thank you for joining us.